Hello, this is Ken Ferry with this week's Boots in the Field report. Saw a lot of activity this week. Chisel plows are running, fertilizer's going on, some strip tilling, some guys running anhydrous this week, soybeans being harvested, winter burn downs going on, and then bam, winter's back. But a lot of activity to get done. We've been spending a lot of time going over yield maps these days and helping the growers make sense out of the 2018 season, seeing what we can learn or reaffirm about our decisions and how that may shape the 2019 decisions. It's that time of year when the results are in and we take a look at how we did. We look for the weakest link so we know where to focus our efforts as well as identify our successes so we know what we can duplicate on more acres. If you never stop to assess your operation, it's hard to improve it. As we work through the yield map meetings with customers, some are more productive than others. Most of these sessions are very productive, and it helps us to identify areas that need improvement and reaffirm the areas that we are moving the needle in the right direction. Making the right decisions on things like drainage, hybrid selection, nitrogen and population rates, fungicide, insecticide applications, all those. Finding combinations that work well, for instance, on light soil versus high pH soil or poorly drained soil. While we may have as many unanswered questions at the end, we have a lot of answers. We have the answer to a lot of the questions moving forward, so we're going in the right direction. But other sessions aren't so clear. It's hard to read what the data is telling us. We end up mainly with unanswered questions in those sessions. So this week, I'd like to cover what makes a good end-of-the-year yield map session and what makes one not so good. What are the differences that make up the difference between a good session, for instance, and a great session? Well, no doubt, the biggest factor is quality maps. Good spatial maps. A map should talk to us when we look at the raw data points. If you have to Krieg a map to get any spatial variability to it, you most likely do not have a good map. So yes, we have to start before harvest to get a good yield map session. And yes, that means a calibrated combine. I know some of you shut your hearing aids off when we talk about calibrating your yield monitors. You think that it takes too much time and it's not worth the effort. Not having good yield maps is a little like taking a class pass-fail. If you made money on the field, you passed. If you lost money, you failed. With no more information than that, and then pass-fail, it's hard to focus on where do you improve. Looking at uncalibrated yield maps is a little bit like looking at that artwork where somebody throws paint at the wall and calls it art. Or one of those pictures where you stare at it for half an hour before you see a hidden image. Calibrated maps should pop out and they should talk to you. With that said, though, calibrated maps are not the only thing that makes a good yield map session. And in some situations, like our seed production and specialty crops, we don't have yield maps. To do a good yearly review, we need to bring in everything we have collected throughout the year. By this, I mean all our records of our applications and timing, hybrid placement, weather records, planting records, field notes, scouting reports, drone images, aerial imagery if we have it. Now today that's a lot easier with software like FieldView that we can record and store the data as applied map. Again, you have to take the time to enter the correct information into that software though to get a good map. If you don't have the iPad or the software to record what happens, written records work well. I'm amazed at how often and how much information you guys can store in a little pocket notebook. Anything that can help us reconstruct the year, even retailer invoices can be used if we have to. Along with the record and data, you need to bring the human experience. I highly recommend as many people as possible in your operation involved in raising the crop should be present. I'm amazed at how many times we find an unanswered anomaly in a map with one operator or scout who is able to pull back his memory and say, yeah, based on what I remember here, we ran out a citrus pass, or we stayed back a pass with the fungicide due to the houses. And that little bit of input that comes in there makes the map jump. The best thing that comes out of having more team members there is you'll notice they all step up their game in about every aspect of the production, from record keeping to calibrating. Pest teams will spend more time collecting drone images and generating detailed reports if they know someone is actually going to look at them. Combine operators will spend more time calibrating if they know they will be sitting in on the yield map and reviewing their work. Sometimes our boardroom is full of people. We have 3 TV screens up so we can look at drone imagery, yield imagery, and NDVI or as applied maps at the same time. The more information we have, the more productive the session is, the more questions we can find answers to. The biggest take-home tends to be learning how well we placed and managed our hybrids and our varieties. I am amazed at how some operations know what hybrid is in every field without even looking them up. This tells me they picked the hybrid for this particular field for a reason. They're placing hybrids based on what they know about the hybrid and the field's strength and weaknesses. Compared to a grower who couldn't tell you what hybrid is in the field without looking it up, or somebody who didn't even bring their hybrid book. This tells me that hybrid placement is not high on their list. So as we work with the customers to get a good yield map session, once we get there, we start to see a lot of changes taking place. They start to, each year, it seems like the yield map session gets a little bit more detailed and a little more information comes out of it once they understand the value of it. So good yield maps, coupled with today's soil maps and now the LiDAR maps, are great building blocks, are a great foundation for variable rate and variable input farming, as well as gearing up for high resolution farming in the future, which you'll hear us talk about that in the future. So a good session is backed by good data and records. When you guys send in your yield data and Katie calls you and asks probably a couple dozen questions pertaining to that yield map, some of you may think you're going through an IRS audit, but it's the information we need to prepare a good yield map session. Then you need to bring the rest: records, images, scouting reports, and team members, etc. So let's take time to make this year's yield map session a good one. To stay up to date, check out our website at croptechinc.com and subscribe to our podcast, Boots in the Field Report. Keep her safe, keep her moving.